Hi. A lot of my colleagues who are therapists tell me that they struggle to work with men, teenage boys. They have a hard time connecting with them. The clients don't seem to connect. They are maybe skeptical about scheduling a first session, or they schedule a first session and then don't come back for a second session. They go a couple weeks and it seems like it's not quite working. They're not really making progress. And this happens at the same time that we hear a lot about the loneliness crisis or loneliness epidemic that boys and men are experiencing. We hear a lot about relatively poor education and employment outcomes for boys and men. And as therapists, for decades, we've known that men have relatively higher rates of suicide, which increased dramatically during the lockdown of 2021 and 2022. We know that men have relatively higher levels of substance abuse problems and overdose deaths. And in fact, in 2018, the APA's guidelines for the psychological practice with boys and men highlighted the importance of making clinical work and other psychological services sensitive to the unique needs of boys and men. My name is Andrew P. Smiler, and I believe that my book can help you with these things. The book is called Clinical Work with Men, Understanding Masculinity in Psychotherapy. My background includes training in both developmental psychology, where I hold a PhD, and clinical psychology, where I hold a master's. I've served as a therapist for over 20 years, starting off in psychiatric hospitals and then moving on to community mental health centers, before finally ending up in a private practice, and I'm currently the owner of a small group practice. My experience has primarily been with male clients, not a lot of therapists who want to work with teenage boys, and for the last 15 years, all of my clients have been males. That's exclusively what I work with, boys and men aged 15 and up. I also have more than 20 years work as a researcher and author writing about men and boys. In fact, Clinical Work with Men is my 5th title. I'm also the author of the award-winning Dating and Sex, a guide for the 21st century teen boy, also published by the APA. So this book, Clinical Work with Men, my goal in writing it wasn't to teach therapists how to do therapy, but to teach them how to be better at addressing those unique needs of boys and men. I'm not teaching clinical practice here, I am teaching the with men part of clinical practice. The book is laid out very directly in the hopes that it really serves as a resource. It contains a brief introduction, much of the material I've already stated, as well as a theoretical framework that I'll detail in a moment, and then 7 case studies where that framework is applied. Each case study addresses how masculinity appears in that man's life and describes both the strengths and the limitations that it provides to that man. The book is meant for anyone who's a therapist, whether you've been doing this for 30 or 40 years, or whether you're just starting your training. So, let's talk about masculinity. What is masculinity? For me, I define masculinity conceptually. It's a culture's expectations for men. 5 words, culture's expectations for men. Sounds like it should be simple, but the reality is that masculinity and men's adherence to cultural expectations are pretty complicated. In part, that's because there are many expectations, but also those expectations change over time, and they sometimes conflict with each other. Masculinity is not logically consistent. We know that American culture's expectations for men touch almost every part of a man's life, and they're ever present. There are very few opportunities when a man gets to put aside these masculine expectations. Women in American society have something similar. It's a pressure to be pretty. The culture allows us to always judge a woman on how pretty she is, no matter what's going on in her life and what situation she finds herself in. And men have a similar experience of masculinity. We can always judge a guy on how masculine he is, no matter what's going on for him or what situation he finds himself in. So, let's talk a little bit more about masculinity. In 2024, I was fortunate enough to be able to publish an article on the multifaceted masculinity framework in the academic journal Psychology of Men and Masculinities. And I talk about 4 specific facets of masculinity, 4 different elements that we might describe or think about. And again, in the book, you can see a lot of these. The first one is masculine criteria. These are our culture's expectations about how men will think, feel, and act. These are masculinity's directives that men should do certain things, like they should be tough, and that they should not do other things, like be feminine. You might think about these as masculinity's rules, or the man box, or a guy's man card. In the academic literature, we measure these as masculine traits, or more recently, masculinity ideology. This idea of criteria, things that men should or should not do, lends itself readily to therapeutic approaches like CBT and DBT, where we often focus on clients' underlying beliefs about how they should be. It also works well with approaches based on values clarification, which was the terminology I learned, and an approach I learned back in the 90s. Values clarification as an approach helps clients understand what's important to them, what do they value. So these approaches readily work with examination of masculine criteria in a guy's life. We can also talk about masculine achievement, a second facet. Achievement is what a guy gets or fails to get from adhering to those criteria. This is the status a guy gets from being judged as having sufficient adherence or insufficient adherence. Joseph Vandello and Jennifer Bosson, social psychologists, for the last 10 years or so have been talking about precarious manhood, the idea that manhood is a status, it's something to be achieved. In their words, it is hard won and easily lost. And if you can win it or lose it, it's an achievement. In everyday language, we talk about guys being man enough. If they're doing really well, we might talk about them as being real man or even the man. Lots of status, lots of achievement there. We also talk about guys doing things to prove their masculinity, to earn punches on their man card. Sometimes we talk about guys engaging in pissing contests and other terminology that wouldn't go with a G rating here. Therapeutically, when we're talking about masculine achievement, I like narrative approaches. I like to ask the guys, okay, so what happens next once you've achieved status as being man enough or real man? Tell me the next chapter in this story. And tell me what happens if it doesn't go that way. Existential approaches are also useful here. Like values clarification, this is a different approach to asking what's important and why is it important? Why do you need to prove your manhood? What do you get from that? So we have masculine criteria, we have masculine achievement. We also have masculine types. This refers to pre-existing images, identities, and stereotypes that are typically associated with men. I could ask you to imagine a jock or a nerd or a rebel or a metrosexual. And if you were to pause for a moment and close your eyes and think about just one of those images or one of those stereotypes or identities, you'd probably come up with a particular mode of dress or mode of appearance, some activities that are associated with that, some beliefs, some criteria, things a guy should or should not do that are associated with that. Right? These are out there in the culture, and we can just choose, guys can just choose to fit into those slots, to adopt those identities. We can also talk about a different set of types here. We can talk about being a good guy or a real man or a traditional man or a progressive man, right? And again, this gives us a sense of who he is and what he does in the world and even how he fits in. Therapeutically, if you have a guy that is talking about some kind of type of man that he is, he might choose to use an approach that is based in identity work. After all, these types are identities, and asking who are you and who do you want to be fits nicely with these kinds of approach, with this element of the multifaceted masculinity framework. If you do parts work, whether it's internal family systems or some other approach, and you're talking about providers or protectors, these are also types. And so they might readily fit in and connect with the multifaceted masculinity framework, and more relevantly, a guy's specific approach to masculinity. So we have masculine criteria, we have masculine achievement, we have masculine types. The fourth facet of this model are masculine negotiations. Formally, masculine negotiations refer to the ways in which men and boys make choices about masculinity, as well as the positive and negative consequences of those choices. I will tell you that as a child, I kind of wanted to be a jock. I'm not that coordinated, not that athletic. And we didn't have the money to get me into all those programs, so I'm just a fan. Therapeutically, almost any approach to therapy connects here as negotiation. What we do as therapists is help clients review their life choices, the decisions they've made. Do they make sense for them? Are they being received well? in the environments that our clients find them in. Those are masculine negotiations. So let me take you through this a little bit with Nishan. Nishan is one of the 7 case studies that I present in the book. And I'm going to hit all 4 of those facets of masculinity here. Nishan, when I first met him, he was a 25-year-old gay black man with a history of perpetrating violence. His history includes having been raped by 3 different perpetrators between the ages of 7 and 13, and none of those occurred just once. They were all ongoing for some period of time. And shortly after his 3rd rape at age 13, he attacked his assailant. He beat him quite badly. And word spread. Just, everybody in the neighborhood knew that had happened. Nishan, after age 13, after that assault that he committed, he was placed out of his home for a while. He also had a history of informal out-of-home placements as well. From the perspective of masculine criteria, Nishan's really adhering to the element of masculinity that says that guys are violent, and it's okay for guys to be violent. As a result of his violence, as a result of his attacking his last assailant, Nishan gained a reputation that generated him a certain amount of safety and even respect. I'll get to the respect in a moment. But the violence gave him safety. People stopped messing with him. People stopped trying to assault him. And we know how important safety is for rape victims. If we think about this in the terms of masculine achievement, Nishan was good enough. His willingness to be violent and his efficacy at being violent. He bragged to me that he had never lost a fight because he had always done more damage than he took. This made him man enough, and even to some friends, some folks in the community, he was the man. He gained a sense of respect. Other people respected him. People stopped messing with him. It was quite the payoff, quite the status that he got, the achievement he got. As a masculine type, if we think about some pre-existing images, you might think about him as an angry young man or an angry black man, depending on how you want to parse those things. And that was certainly a type that other folks saw him as, school administrators, for example. It also fit with his history of being easily angered, a history of not negotiating, history of quote-unquote always being ready to fight. This is one of the images of men that we carry. And then in therapy, we had a lot of negotiation, and the negotiations took several years. I'm not going to shortchange that. We had a lot of conversation about how to not be violent, but then what happens if he's not violent? Who is he then? We were able to shift his masculine criteria for one that was focused on being violent to one that was focused on being independent. And for me, I like the term self-sufficient more so than independent. This fit with his pre-existing preference to be left alone. And again, if you'd been assaulted the way he'd been assaulted, you probably wouldn't want to have a whole lot to do with other people either. As a form of masculine achievement, being self-sufficient certainly gives a guy a sense of achievement. Taking care of yourself, that's important. Not letting someone else take care of you, that's bad. As a masculine type, he was something of a loner. And that loner image has some negative connotations, but it's viable, and he was willing to lean into that. So we worked with that. And so this is part of the breakdown that you'll see in each of the chapters. We'll also talk more about strengths and weaknesses, which I'm not doing here. There are 6 other men in the book as well, 6 other types or images. And I believe that if you can understand and use the multifaceted masculinity framework, criteria, achievement, types, negotiations, then I believe you'll be better able to help your male clients. You'll be able to connect with them better, they'll stay longer, and they'll see more success. I want to thank you for listening. I hope you remember that men are complicated. I hope you buy the book. If you want more information on me, including my availability for clinical consultation, please check me out on my website, andrewsmiler.com. Thank you.